right, guys, another massive win for the Gophers over the weekend against ranked Oregon, a 77-69 win. Tony Liebert, what's going on? This is three big wins in a row for the Gophers. It seems like things are starting to turn around for Ben Johnson and the Gophers in the middle of the season. What's behind this to start off the show here? What's behind this? We'll discuss whether we should change our expectations a little bit later on, but I just kind of want to get your thoughts and insight into how the Gophers have started to turn things around in the tough part of their schedule.
Yeah, I mean, earlier in the year, I talked about how their transfer portal additions just weren't working, and I think their turnaround has happened because those additions now have finally settled into their roles. When your whole roster is essentially brand new, minus two or three players, it's really hard for guys that have been playing a certain role at a different program for their whole career to come in and be fine playing off the ball or be fine being the third or fourth option. And I think Lakai Patterson, Femi Odakale, and Frank Mitchell are finally comfortable in their roles with this team. And it's opening the door for Dawson Garcia, for Parker Fox to have these big games. And Lakai Patterson's playing well off the ball, which is something we didn't see earlier in the year. Femi Odakale is making far fewer mistakes, and he's playing more efficient basketball, and he's looking for a shot. And Frank Mitchell's adding some good rebounding. And them being able to play as those third, fourth, fifth options on this offense, I think, has what has created success for them in the last three games.
Dude, it's been crazy to watch. I mean, I don't think anybody on planet Earth could have watched that team even 2.5 weeks ago and said Ben Johnson has a chance to survive what's happening. And again, a lot of it wasn't his fault. The transfer portal robbed him of what, 8 players from last year's team. Tom Izzo in mid-March, after the Spartans knocked the Gophers out of the Big Ten tournament last season, said that might be the number one team in the conference next season. And that was with Elijah Hawkins, Pharrell Payne, Josh Ola Joseph, all these guys who ended up. Cam Christie, obviously, who's lighting up the G League for the Clippers. I mean, these dudes could play. And what's amazing about it is that this year's Gophers team, just out of nowhere, has more quad one wins than last year's team had. That's insane. And that is a testament to Ben Johnson's coaching and the ability to stick to it through this really rough weather and come out on the other side looking better than anybody could have imagined. So I think Ben Johnson went from a position of being on the hottest seat in the country to reconvincing people that maybe he is the right guy for this job. It's amazing. Now, you got to show it for more than 3 games, but this is a really nice sample size where they've looked like a completely different ball club. And I think the key to it all is 2 guys Tony mentioned, Lukai Patterson and Femi Odakale. Femi Odakale, what up, Liebert? He has been phenomenal, and he's been one of the primary ball handlers, right? This dude is coming up the court. He's controlling the pace of the game, and the Gophers don't play a speedy offense. They don't. They like to slow it down. But he's really done a good job of being one of the main ball handlers on this team, and that's taken the pressure off of freshman Isaac Osama off the bench. And then, like Tony said, Lukai Patterson coming off the ball, he's hitting jump shots, he's driving to the rim. These are things the Gophers did not do against some of the worst teams on the planet, and they were barely winning or losing those games. So it's been an incredible turnaround, and I'm sorry, Ben Johnson. I should have trusted you more. I was wrong. I think everybody was wrong, but you still have to continue to do it over the course of the rest of the Big Ten season. And yeah, there is a little bit of hope that some magic is in existence here. Maybe there's a little bit of a slipper story unfolding in front of our eyes.
I'll get to Ben Johnson's status and his hot seat in a little bit. I want to ask you guys, though, is this sustainable? It's been 3 games, 3 tough opponents, 3 different scenarios here for them that they've pulled off big wins. Is what we've seen in these 3 games, in this 3-game turnaround, sustainable for the rest of the season? Tony, I'll start with you.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like Joe mentioned, I think if anyone watched that Ohio State game and the way that game ended, and then at that point, I think they fell to 0-4 in the Big Ten, get blown out against Wisconsin, and then drop one on the road to Maryland. a lot of teams across the country would just give up on the season at that point. Like your whole team is transfers. None of these guys help build the program. It's real easy for a lot of those guys, 21, 22 years old, to just be like, oh, season's over, starting to look ahead what's after. And I think Ben Johnson deserves a lot of credit for keeping them bought in and winning these 3 games. It's just something a lot of people couldn't have seen coming. But as it comes to sustainability, I think it's a really interesting question because the second half of their schedule in the Big Ten lightens up dramatically. They played Michigan and Oregon, or 2 ranked teams contending for some top seeds in the Big Ten tournament. Now they have Michigan State and Illinois and Wisconsin, but you have a lot of games against Penn State, Washington, Northwestern, Nebraska, Rutgers, which are all on the Gophers level, especially if they're playing like they have the last 3 games. So a lot of those games that 2 weeks ago looked like kind of tough, maybe Penn State on the road, how are they going to win that game? That game looks a lot easier now. And so if you pick up 5 of those, and then we're looking even at 8 conference wins, and then maybe 1 or 2 more upsets, you can talk yourself pretty quickly into 10 conference wins.
Joe, is this sustainable?
Yeah, I don't see why it's not. I mean, that Oregon win was phenomenal. I mean, the Gophers jumped out to a 17-point lead early, and then Oregon climbs all the way back, takes a lead early in the second half. Mike Mitchell's not hitting anything, and they still find a way to win. I mean, that was pretty crazy. Maybe there's some mystique for teams coming into the barn for the first time. I mean, Oregon hasn't played here for, I don't know when the last time Oregon's ever played at Williams Arena, but they come in here and they got shown a lesson. They got taught a lesson. And that was with Minnesota being lousy at the free throw line too. So they overcame a lot in that game. TJ Bamba from Oregon, that's like a little mini Anthony Edwards. He's a freak athlete. He's so fast. He's so dynamic. Everything about that game screamed, this is not going to go Minnesota's way. But the fact that they maintained and pulled that off and actually, won with some emotion. Dawson Garcia with the big right-handed slam and screaming in front of the fans at the end of that one. That was phenomenal. You could get a rude awakening Tuesday night against Michigan State. You got to go to East Lansing. That's the hottest team in the country. They've won 12 games in a row. Everybody says they're the toughest team on the planet to play. They've got the size, they've got the depth, they've got the speed, they've got the guards, they've got the bigs, they got the forwards. They've got it all. But if Minnesota shows they can hang with Michigan State on the road, that's going to be another story to tell, right? But like Tony said, the schedule does favor them a little bit here down the stretch. And really, guys, when we looked at this transfer portal roster before the season began, we were like, well, there's a chance. They've got so much experience. They've got so much age and wisdom. This could be good. This could be a potential tournament team. This could be better than what the Big Ten media was predicting as a last place finish. So maybe it is all coming together for this team. And if you're 3-6 in conference play and you look at the rest of their schedule, I mean, Michigan State's probably a loss. You're probably not going in there to beat Izzo and the hottest team in the country. If they do, everybody should immediately start thinking NCAA tournament. If they don't, well, then you just look to Washington. They should beat Washington at home. Washington's terrible. Can they win on the road again? They won at Iowa. Can they go to Penn State and do it on February 4th, next Tuesday? Why not? Illinois comes in here. Illinois is very good. That's a potential Sweet 16 team or deeper come tournament time. Brad Underwood's a phenomenal head coach. So they've got some tough games ahead, but this team, is it sustainable? There's nothing to suggest that it isn't. And if they can get their free throw shooting on point, they could be very dangerous for anybody they play.
Should we adjust our expectations? Because I know, Tony, you mentioned it earlier. With the way they were losing some of these games earlier this season, it was easy to write off the rest of the season and just give up on the rest of this campaign and maybe give up on the Ben Johnson era. Should we adjust our expectations off of these 3 wins? And if so, what's it going to take to get this team, miracle run into the tournament? What's it going to take?
Yeah, it's a really interesting discussion because if you look at postseason now, a lot of those games, revisionist history, the Ohio State game should have won that one. The Wichita State game, you have the 3 that bounced off the rim like 3 different times. like both of those games, if those are wins, it's a much different outlook, even which is 2 more wins. So I think I don't really even entirely know how I should react to the last 3 games and the overarching outlook of the program, outlook of the season, but the schedule plays a big role into it. Like Joe said, Michigan State's going to be a tough game. Illinois is going to be a tough game. But a lot of those other ones you can talk yourself into if you're being an optimistic Gophers fan. So I think the NIT college basketball crown discussion is pretty realistic now after those 3 wins because they're net now. The ranking in the net rankings is very at least respectable compared to what it was before. So there's some you can be optimistic, but it's such a big difference from what it was the first 2 months of the year that it's just still a lot to learn over the next 5 games, I think.
I'm going to make some predictions. I'm going to go through the rest of their schedule. They've got 11 games left, all Big Ten. Let's see where they finish, shall we?
Sure.
Okay. They're 3-6 in conference play entering Tuesday night at Michigan State. They're going to lose to Izzo. That's 3-7. They're going to beat Washington. That's 4-7. They're going to go to Penn State and win. That's 5-7. Illinois comes to town on a Saturday night on Big Ten Network, and Minnesota shocks Brad Underwood and that ranked squad. That's the third-ranked win, big quad one victory, and suddenly they're 6-7, and USC's on red alert for the week later game, February 15th. USC's not very good. 7-7. UCLA, they sweep Los Angeles, 8-7. Penn State comes here, 9-7. Northwestern's dog crap, 10-7. Am I doing my math right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're on track.
At Nebraska, we always lose at Nebraska, 10-8. Wisconsin comes here, 11-8. You go to Rutgers. Rutgers has so much talent; they're kind of scary. Ace Bailey and what's his face?
Dylan
Who's the other
Harper.
top 3 pick? Yeah, Dylan Harper. He's a monster, but they're not a good team. 12-8, 12-8, and they're in the tourney. And I was thinking all along, if they can get to 10-10 and they're hot going into the Big Ten tournament, and as long as they don't get knocked out early, they've got a shot to be looked at as, well, this team's been on a bit of a tear. The selection committee might look at them and say, hey, you're ranked 63rd in the net or something like that. We're going to put you in as a 12 seed. It's very possible, you guys. This is dramatic. This is magic. This is what March Madness is all about. And Minnesota's got this old team, and Dawson Garcia should be in the mix for Big Ten Player of the Year. I mean, you got something here. You got something here. And that's saying that this is the most incredible turnaround ever if they actually do it. You can't start 0-6 and do anything. And if they do it, and they can, they have the potential to do it. Contract extension, Ben Johnson. I mean, it's almost a lock at that point. I mean,
that would be ending the season on a 12-2 run.
Dude, let's roll. Why not? They just took down Michigan. They won at Iowa, where they blew a 20-point game last year with a better roster, and then they beat Oregon. I mean, and Oregon had all their dogs. I mean, this is nothing to scoff at, guys. It's not like there's the fluky wins. I mean, these are impressive. I will say the Michigan win shouldn't have gone to overtime. It got a little dicey at the end there, but they pulled it out. So, you know, that logo 3 from Dawson Garcia might have been the magical moment that sends this team on a crazy epic run to end the season.
Realistically, though, a lot of the
what are you saying? I'm not realistic?
No, but in all honesty, the games you went by. So let's say they lose Michigan State, which they'll probably be double-digit underdogs, and then Washington at home, they'll probably be favored in that game. Penn State's probably the easiest place to play in the entire Big Ten. On a Tuesday, that's a very winnable game. It'll probably be 4 or 5 point spread. And then at that point, you still have a ton of momentum. And Illinois at home, we just saw how loud the barn can get for these big ranked games. Like, they'd obviously be underdogs in that game, but there's a lot of momentum there. And if they can upset either Michigan State on the road, Illinois at home, or UCLA on the road, and then win all those other games, like Northwestern, Nebraska, those aren't impossible places to play. So it's obviously insane to go 12-2 to finish the year, but game by game, it's really not that insane if you look at it.
It's not. I mean, they got to play consistent basketball, but and that is a fairy tale story, right? It's
Yeah.
not likely. It's not likely. It's rather unlikely. But if they can play above 500 rest of the way, they can finish close to 500 at the end of the season in the conference tournament and go into that thing with a little momentum, a little
Yeah.
juice. And if they win a conference tourney game or two, hey, you can't write them out on it. You might be sweating it on Selection Sunday. That's possible.
Yeah.
I know before this 3-game run started, there was a lot of talk, and Joe, you mentioned it earlier on, about Ben Johnson's status as the long-term head coach of this program and his hot seat, or his seat being extremely hot. What has this 3-game run done for you in that conversation, in that thinking about whether he should return next season, Tony?
Yeah, it's really interesting because college basketball's seen such a big change over the last 5 years with NIL, transfer portal, bigger conferences, and the Gophers have been one of the teams hit the hardest. And Ben Johnson started his coaching career when all of this change started. So he's been dealt a very tough hand. A lot of injuries too. Parker Fox, Isaiah Enan, Dawson Garcia's been banged up a bunch. And I do think it changes it a little bit if he can go on a magical run like this because I think as a program, Minnesota needs to look at itself and see where they are standing in the rest of the Big Ten. And they have different expectations than a program like Michigan, Purdue, Michigan State. Uh, they've only been to one Final Four, and it technically doesn't even count. So you have to look at the bigger landscape. Like, what are they going to do if they don't get Ben Johnson, or if they do let go of Ben Johnson? What are the options out there? In the short term, maybe another year of Ben Johnson with revenue sharing coming in, no matter how they finish the year, might be the best long term play for the program. And then you can reassess after next year. They probably will. They definitely will have a much different team, no matter who the head coach is. Because I think they only have 3 or 4 guys with eligibility left after this year. So it's a really, I think, it should be viewed as a complex discussion because I a lot of people in sports, it's very like black and white, just fire the head coach or keep the head coach. And he's just been dealt a really unique circumstance with a lot of things. And if they're even able to remain competitive down the end of the year, I have a much different outlook on the discussion. And if they went like 2-18 in the Big Ten.
Joe, how many
which
wins do you need to see? Big Ten wins do you need to see from the Gophers this season for Ben Johnson to keep hold of this job next year?
I'd say 8, and I'd pretty confidently be like he deserves another year.
Yeah, I mean, I it's not necessarily about the number of games they win in the conference for me. It's about how they play. It's about how they compete. It's about the style of play. It's about the execution. Because in the first, what was it? I don't know, probably 15 games of this season, it didn't look like they were running an offense. I'm watching these games and I'm like, what in the hell is going on? There's nobody moving. There's no screens being set. This looks like they're just out there playing 5-on-5 on a Wednesday night at Richfield High School, 40-year-old league, like me, And I'm like, what is this? It didn't look like actually coached up basketball. It looks like that now. So I'm dumbfounded about how that even happened for the first 15 games of the season. It was really shocking because you watching that and it's like, holy crap, these guys can't shoot. They can't make free throws. There's no execution. I mean, they keep making the same mistakes over and over again. You have one of the oldest teams in the country. This should be the easiest team you've ever coached because they have more experience. So that didn't look good. If I'm Mark Coyle, I call Tom Izzo and I'm like, dude, what would you do? Give me the lowdown. What would you do? Would you bring Ben Johnson back? Do you believe in Ben Johnson? And I know that Tom Izzo is a Ben Johnson supporter, but I would ask him for his brutally honest truth. Do you think he can do it? And I would take that, and I would put a lot of weight in his response. Of course, that's in a perfect world, and that'll never happen, but that's what I would do. So I need to see this kind of basketball that we've seen over the last 3 games continue for the rest of the way. You can't have any of these epically bad performances where you're just left speechless and wondering how the hell these guys are even in college basketball and how Ben Johnson got a job in the first place. You cannot be thinking that way. You have to respect what the guys are doing on the floor and how they're actually performing. So as long as they do that, and the recruiting is a big part of this too, you got to remember this is not a great recruiting class coming in on paper for the 2025 Gophers basketball team. This Parker Jefferson guy had a triple-double in high school the other night, like 20, 10, and 10. And that's like, whoop-de-doo. That's nice. Is he going to translate to the Big Ten? We have no idea. What do they have? A couple of other 3-star guys who are coming in. And beyond that, it does not look great. So, you whiffed on this transfer portal class until all of a sudden you didn't. So this has to continue before you can put a full trust into Ben Johnson. And if you're going to make that decision, if you're firing Ben Johnson, you 100% have to bring in a big name who's going to help you on every level, from recruiting to execution to performing to just being a guy who's going to bring the spotlight back to Minnesota.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. A big 11-game stretch down the season here. Joe's on record 9-2 for the rest of the season, a 12-2 run to close out the season as they make their way into the NCAA tournament, because that's what we do here. Joe makes predictions and we all laugh at it, and he comes
Sweet
out
16, baby.
And he comes out right in the end because he predicted the Vikings 14 wins this season, and that played out well. So
I'm a genius, and nobody can deny it.
Joe's a genius, and that's how we're going to end the show. Do hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. Does help us get found. Does also notify you every time we post a new video here on the channel. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.